Okay, we're recording.
We're interviewing Roger M. Wells. The interviewer is Michael Akey. It's January 3rd, year 2001, Latham, New York. Mr. Wells, what were you doing prior to World War II?
Well, I was working in a sort of a defense plant in Hudson Falls, wasn't it? So I was exempt from the draft, but after a while, all the young fellows had left, and our forces were taking a beating, and I got impatient, and I tried to enlist in the Navy, but they said they were getting all the people they needed for the draft, so I called the draft board and said, if I quit my job, will I be drafted? And they said, definitely. So I said, I'm quitting today, and the next day I got my greetings.
When was this?
I tried to enlist in the Navy right at the day of Pearl Harbor, but this was a little while after that.
Okay. And you went to basic training where?
At the 78th Infantry Division in North Carolina.
Okay.
I was there for about a year, and then when it came time to ship out, I was detached and sent to a replacement depot, and then we did ship out, and at that period my life was divided into sort of monthly segments. We arrived in England a month before D-Day. We waded ashore on Utah Beach a month after D-Day, and I was assigned to the 4th Infantry Division, and I was wounded a month later.
What was it like, your experience in basic training?
Oh, the parts that were pretty rough physically, and you had to learn to obey orders and so forth.
And you were then assigned to a replacement center?
After basic training.
After
was
basic
finished.
training?
Yeah.
What was it like being a replacement as opposed to going out with
Well,
a
it was
unit?
pretty disappointing. I had trained with these guys for about a year, and I had made some good friends, and I thought I was part of a crack combat unit, and I had been shipped out. That was pretty disappointing, but the replacement segment didn't last very long. Soon after I was sent to a replacement center, we shipped overseas, and then I was assigned to the 4th Division.
You were assigned to the 4th Division in England?
Normandy.
Normandy, okay. How many, you came into Normandy about a month after?
Yeah, just a month after D-Day,
Okay.
and a month after that I was wounded.
So you were in the bocage, the field, the walled fields.
Oh, yeah, the hedgerows.
Hedgerows.
Yes,
Okay. What was it like in the hedgerows?
terrible.
Were you trained for the hedgerows?
Well, no, we didn't know anything about them until we got over there. But, well, as it says in that little statement that I made, most of the fields in that section of Normandy were divided into rectangles by these earthen hedgerows, and the hedgerows had many years of brush growing on the top of them. And this brush perfectly concealed the German enemies. We couldn't see them when we were advancing toward them, and that made it pretty rough.
So
My 100-man squad had 300 casualties in the month that I was there.
So you went in July? Into
Yes.
Okay. And how how did your division approach dealing with the hedgerows? Was it a learning process and how to attack a hedgerow?
Well, we tried to use them as a defense as much as we could, but the whole thing was that we were trying to advance against the Germans, and the Germans were invisible behind these hedgerows, and we were advancing across open fields. So our casualty rate was tremendous. Outside of one instance, I don't know of anybody in my outfit that had shot a German. They were invisible. On the other hand, we had 300% casualties.
So you were a rifleman at that point?
Yes, that's another little thing. I didn't get into the Navy, and I was detached from the 78th Division because I was nearsighted. But the Army, in its infinite wisdom, made me a #1 scout in the rifle squad. So I guess that was, they put me up front so I could see better.
How was it, what was it like being, what were the duties of a scout?
Well, in any advance, you were #1, you were out in front. There's several things about that I don't know how much you want to go into detail, but...
Plenty of detail.
Well, one time, we were advancing across a field, and it was tall, I don't know if it was grass or crops or what it was, but tall grass, and I was #1 scout, so I was out in the front, and all of a sudden this German jumped up in front of me, but not more than 10 feet away. It scared the hell out of me, but then he put up his hands and camera, and so I wanted to know if there were any other Germans around, and I asked him. I said, Andre Minen here? And that was what I thought was the right question. He said, nix Minen. But later I found out that I should have asked about Soldaten because he had told me no mines. Mm-hmm. And another time we were advancing along a country road that had been cleared of Germans, and we took a break near a French farmhouse, and after a while some of the farmers cautiously appeared, and all of a sudden they realized that we were the first Americans they had seen. So there was a big shout went up, and the rest of the farmers came pouring out of the farmhouse, and soon the bottles and glasses appeared, and it was a hot, thirsty day, and the drinks were in great demand. So being the first one in the column, I got the first glass, and I threw it down appreciatively. And we were used to a mild French cider, but this was straight Calvados, and it exploded like a firebomb. And I turned away so the guys couldn't see the expression on my face, and I sat down to watch, and the reactions I saw had me rolling on the ground.
So you were in a 10-man squad?
I think there were 12.
12-man. Okay. Did you know these guys? You didn't know these guys for long, did you?
No, actually I can only remember one person's name, and that was a sergeant that was there when we got there. He was a veteran, and that's the only one I remember, but I remember him quite well. He was a friend of the GIs. He backed up the recruits when they were having problems and so forth, but he was a good soldier. But later on we found him with combat fatigue. He was dead to the world, and that really, after a while, that really got to me, because I understand that combat fatigue is considered worse than wounds, because that's sometimes is never completely healed. And this guy had a, that's the only, Sergeant O'Brien is the only name that I remember, because Well, as I say, 300 replacements in a 100-man squad. Um, you didn't see anybody very long. And, well, I don't remember any of the other guys' names.
What kind of equipment were you carrying? You were armed with what as a scout?
Well, at first they gave me a carbine, but then they gave me, well, part of the time I had a M1 and part of the time I had a BAR. As I say, nobody that I know of had shot a German while I was there, and they were invisible. But there was one instance where a patrol from the squad had been captured, and everybody killed except one young GI. They let him go. I guess you're trying psychology to frighten us or something. The result was exactly the opposite. But later on, a German was captured, and this young GI identified him as the one who had pulled the helmet down over a well-known sergeant from our outfit and shot him through the helmet. Then another veteran in the squad, who was a close friend of this sergeant, volunteered to take him back to headquarters, and a couple minutes later we heard a shot, and the sergeant returned to the squad, and nobody said anything, but everybody knew what had happened. That's the only German that we know of that was killed.
What did you think of the German as an opponent? Were they good soldiers?
I guess I didn't really have any basic opinions about that. I just knew that they were there, and we had to get them before they got us, if we could.
So when you're moving through the hedgerows, how did you maneuver through the hedgerows? When you're trying to capture a
Well,
hedgerow?
the only way you could do it is you get behind one hedgerow and stay there for the night, and then the next day you'd have to get up and go over the hedgerow and walk across this open field toward the next hedgerow, and that was murder.
Any supporting arms? Any armor or?
Well, the system was that if we advanced to a point where we ran into Germans, we withdrew with our dead and wounded and called for artillery, and the artillery reduced that position, and then when that was done, the whole process was repeated over and over and over. That's why I say in my little speech that the GIs who repeatedly advanced against an invisible enemy, they were as heroic as anybody else.
Mm-hmm. So what were the circumstances of your wounding?
Well, I don't know how much of a story you want to get into, but this one night, the squad was positioned behind a forward hedgerow with no friendly forces on either side. And so consequently, guards had to be posted on both side hedgerows to prevent a surprise flanking attack. So it became obvious, well, to begin, at the right end of the forward hedgerow where we were positioned, there was an opening to allow passage of farm wagons. Now, during the night, the German machine gun had been firing off and on, but with no effect due to the darkness. But it became obvious that when it became daylight, the the two right flank guards posted near that opening would become clearly visible and easy targets. And I was one of those guards. And I was aware of our situation, and my companion, I'm pretty sure it was, but neither one mentioned it. We just held our position. And when it got light, the gunner spotted the target and opened fire. My friend was hitting the arm, and I was hitting both legs.
How were you immediately evacuated?
Yes. They carried me over to an ambulance, and I had a night-long ride over a shell-torn road in a blacked-out ambulance. And there was a little uneasiness when German fighter planes came over looking for something to shoot up. But then we were evacuated to England in a transport which ran off the runway to some unprintable language from the stretchers. And then later on, we were in a hospital train in England and stopped in stations where passengers were waiting on the platform, and the windows were open in the cars, and you could hear people saying, "Oh, what a pity, those poor brave boys." But then two sexy girls walked by, and the whistle, after the whistles and shouting died down, that was apparent the attitude on the platform had changed. They were saying, "Oh, those bloody Yanks, they whistled over a woman if they were dead."
So your care was pretty good?
Oh, yes. I was in the Army hospital in England for most of the winter months. And I remember it was during the Battle of the Bulge. And we could hear the radio broadcasting there about the GIs who were freezing and dying there, and I almost felt guilty lying on clean white sheets in a warm, comfortable bed. Sorry.
It's okay. You were in the hospital for about how long?
For most of the winter months.
Okay. And when you recovered, what was your next assignment?
Well, I was on what they call limited duty, no more infantry. So was sent back to England and assigned to the 457th Anti-Aircraft Artillery.
Okay.
And that was a picnic.
What type of weapons were they using?
Well, we had 44 millimeter cannons and a quad-mounted, that is 4-barrel 50 caliber machine gun.
And you were stationed in England?
No, this was back in Europe.
Okay.
We were going toward Germany.
So you're in basically a support, well...
Well, yes, I did capture some Germans, though.
Tell us about that.
We were so far behind the front, and the country was so peaceful that, well, see, there was a rule that anyone leaving the gun position wear a helmet and carry a rifle. However, we were so far behind the lines that this rule wasn't really rigidly enforced. So one day I'm walking along a path through the woods, and I see these great blankets lying on the ground, and I look, and here's 3 Kraut soldiers lying there asleep with their rifles beside them. And I didn't have any weapons, so I carefully turned around and tiptoed out of there and went down to the road and found an MP, an armed MP, and we went back and captured the Germans. The 2 younger ones were glad it was all over, and they were very willing to cooperate. But the veteran non-com, he looked at his men with contempt and so forth. It was a souvenir time, and I pulled an epaulet off the non-com, and I don't know what happened to it, but my hand slipped and hit him in the jaw, and I'll never forget the glare that I got.
So you were in this anti-aircraft unit for about how long?
Oh, well, it's history, I guess. I don't know.
To the end of the
I
war?
was there until the end, until the peacetime, yeah.
And this unit was stationed, what, mainly in...
Well, we were gradually advancing, but
Okay.
it was nothing like the infantry and the big trucks. And you're just lying on top of the canvas enjoying the scenery. And it was a picnic.
Well, what army were you with at that point? Or what division?
I think it was, that was a 457th Anti-Aircraft Artillery Brigade, I think it was.
Okay.
I guess we're all part of the 3rd Army.
Pat,
Yeah.
what did you think of him?
I thought he was sort of a lucky bastard. He went barreling across the country, and his supply lines could have been cut at any time, but he was lucky.
What did you think of most of your officers?
Some are fine, some were wonderful guys, and some were not so good. I remember one time in the anti-aircraft, while we were in there, the first German jet planes came into being. And once in a while, they would come over us, and one day one dropped some bombs in our area, and a battery sergeant running for cover tripped over an ammunition box and fell scratching his arm. And later I heard him saying to the battery commander, some of the fellows think I should get a Purple Heart, but I don't think so. Do you, sir? But the officer, I went to the officer and complained, saying Purple Heart is meant for wounds suffered by the enemy action. But the officer apparently liked the idea of having him be medal members in his unit, so the GI got the Purple Heart, or the sergeant got his Purple Heart. But that's, I don't know whether this is going to come out in the tape, but when a person or a unit is chicken shit, there's no other word for it.
That's okay. Where were you when the war in Europe ended?
Well, we were in Germany. Actually, as I remembered, it was a nice area. We had swimming pools and all that stuff. And what I remember most about that is that I felt, and I guess everybody else did, that the world had gone through such hell. Now that this was over, if the different governments didn't make sure that it didn't happen again, they had better, but they didn't. They started arguing right away between the governments, and I don't know, that was pretty disgusting.
Was there any rumor about once the war in Europe was over that you'd end up going to Japan?
Well, yes. When the war ended in Europe, I was still in this anti-aircraft unit, and one day I met some fellows from the 4th Infantry Division, and they said they were being shipped back to the States and then to Asia, to Japan, to the other war. And there was a provision where you could apply for transfer to your old unit, so I applied because I figured by the time they got to the States and back to the Pacific, the war would be over there. But turned out I was too late. They were already moving on and I was rejected, so I had to stay with them.
Did you get to go on leave very much?
Yeah, I went to Hitler's Berchtesgaden and went to Paris. I had a pass and went to England and Scotland. Scotland was beautiful, but I live in Lake George, and I think Lake George is more beautiful.
Little plug there, that's okay. Did you interact much with the German civilians towards the end?
They seemed very pleasant and congenial, and I got the feeling that they didn't realize that the tactics that Hitler's people had used on the Jews and the fact that they were trying to take over the world. And I kind of discussed this with them, and I asked them, how come you people followed Hitler the way you did? And someone would say, well, before he came to power, the country was in terrible shape, and he improved it so much we had to be loyal. And I said, well, what about his idea for taking over the world? And they say, well, we don't know too much about that. And they didn't know anything about the concentration camps and the gas ovens and so forth. They didn't believe that. But I understand they were taking on tours of those camps later to show them. I know when we're going through the country with the anti-aircraft, we ran across a lot of prison stripe garb guys lying beside the road half dead, and wondered if these other people had seen them.
Do you have any? Do you have a single memory that you take away from your experience?
No, not a single one. I guess there are different types, but some are fairly good memories and some are not so good. But I don't think I have anything. Just recently, well, if you read that little speech that I wrote up, I can't really understand how people can change the way they do it. Like myself and millions of other American citizens whose main pursuit was comfort and luxury, all of a sudden they're aggressive combatants. They're going into battle regardless of life and injury and so forth, without hesitation. And this is something that I guess I'll quite never understand. Combat was not talked about or even thought about for many years after the war. We wanted to forget it. But lately, it seems to have resurfaced. And after more than 50 years, we're now going to have a memorial. But what transforms a person from something the exact opposite of what he used to be is not understandable. I guess I'm never completely understand that.
Do you believe it was worthwhile, the American?
Oh, yes, it had to be. World War I and II, we had no choice if we wanted to stay free. But the ones after that, there's a big question. I guess I'm a little isolationist, but I think that we're involving our military people in ways that doesn't make sense.
Do you have any other things you'd like to share with us?
I'll probably think of something later, but
You can always jot them down and mail it off to me.
well, I think it's probably pretty well covered in that little
Okay.
letter I wrote there.
Well, that's great. Well, Mr. Wells, thank you very much. This was a very good interview.
I think.
Uh,
How do I, my family asked.
Would like a copy?
Yes.
All right. We can get you that. It's going to take a while. We're